I'm thankful that we are close and that, I feel him, I hear him in different ways. And it's a calming presence that is always there for me.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, keeping Jesus in the sports conversation. Here's your host for today's show, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
Coach Joni Taylor, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you?
I'm good, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad we could have you here on the podcast. Excited to talk to you about coaching and faith and all sorts of good stuff here. I thought we'd start with lessons because there seems like there's always lessons in every phase of life, every journey, every season. You just finished your first season with Texas A&M. Obviously not the season that you would hope when you're coaching because you want to win a lot of games and play in the postseason. But it's in that adversity, I think, where lessons can be learned and you can take away a lot of positives too and move forward. Can you share what this past season kind of taught you and showed you?
Honestly, Jason, the word that I kept saying for this season was for myself was joy.
Yeah.
Like, where can I find joy in everything? Because when we came here, we knew we were, taking over a program that needed some work, right? Texas A&M traditionally is a powerhouse in women's basketball, won a national championship in 2011. 2 years ago, won the SEC conference outright. But the year before we came, they'd only won 4 conference games and all those players graduated. And so we knew we were taking on a team that was inexperienced, had not been in the trenches, and we were going to have our bumps and our challenges. And so for me personally, it was, where can I find joy in everything? And then I think for our team, we just talked about just becoming. That was going to be the lesson in becoming. And I think it was also, how do you measure success when it doesn't come in a win?
Right.
We put so much value in winning and losing, as we should. We're competitors, and there is a end result to what it is we're doing. But this season, our success may not come in a win. So what are we putting our value in? And we just talked about, those measured things that we can come into every game and have measured things for what was a win for us when it didn't show up in the win column necessarily. And then the biggest thing, Jason, that I was excited to just share with them, and our staff was excited to talk to them about, was like, sowing and reaping and harvest. And so that obviously leads to talking about faith, but there are seasons that you sow and there's seasons that you harvest. And we were in a season of sowing. So what kind of seeds are we planting within our team, at the university, within the athletic department, in the Brazos Valley? Like, we want to plant seeds. And so that's what we're doing this year. And you don't plant a seed and then you turn around a week later and you have this sprout of a tree or a bush or a plant or whatever it is. And so just teaching them what that journey is like. And that's so much like our faith, right? Our faith journey is the same way. You've got to plant a ton of seeds in your relationship with God, and then you can't expect him to just, after one prayer, one scripture reading, one devotional, to just answer everything and give you everything that you want. So there were so many connecting layers, for us this season. And at the end of the year, we were able to have some success, win a couple games in our tournament. And so I think that gave them, some happiness, because of just seeing how their work paid off, and to be able to kind of put that together with some wins. But I think just lessons for me was just to enjoy every moment. And I really tried to be intentional about celebrating every little thing, because I am somebody who can be like, all right, check the box, what's next? Check the box, what's next? I don't really take a ton of time to enjoy things as they're happening. But I knew this year was going to be challenging. We actually had a great time coaching them because of that. And I think it's because of the mentality we had as a staff. Those young ladies played their heart out for us. And we celebrated when they dove on the ground for loose balls. We celebrated when they made threes, layups, things that you kind of in the past, honestly, have taken for granted. We celebrated all those things. And I think because we had some intentionality behind finding joy, we were able to have a really good year. It was, I think, in my opinion, even with our record, it was one of our best coaching jobs that we've done, because we had to just really be a devil in the details and dive into some things. And we got those young ladies to believe and to stick together through some challenging times, even with our injuries. And so just proud of what we were able to do.
Yeah, I've heard you use the word joy a lot, even just in your answer there. And I think about joy and happiness, and we've heard it, if you've been in the church circles at all, like, happiness is fleeting, but joy is, everlasting, right? And yet it's hard to find joy when you don't have the success on the court. And it feels like sometimes it's easier to find joy when you do have success, and yet the joy doesn't change, right? So can you kind of compare finding joy as a coach, regardless of the wins or losses in, the years that you've been doing this?
Yeah, well, so the first thing I'll say is, joy comes from God, right? That's who gives us our joy. So the first place you got to find your joy is in the Lord. He's the one who sustains us and gives us what we need. And so that's the first thing you've got to be focused on. And then the other thing that really comes to mind is, in our weakness is where he's strong. So it comes back to the same thing. Like sometimes he puts you in positions where you feel helpless, where you feel weak, where you feel like you don't have an answer. And that's where he wants us, because if we always felt confident and we were sure, then we wouldn't look to him. Right. And so, the joy of the Lord is my strength is something, again, that we spend a lot of time, and I spend a lot of time focusing on. I think that's really important, because when you are winning, it's easy to be happy or think that you have joy. But when you are having challenging times, when you're going to have a challenging season, if you are then able to still be joyful in the beauty of the things around you, having a roof over your head, having a great job, working with coworkers and colleagues who, you share a lot of commonalities with and get along with, I think it makes it's for me, it made me realize still through it all how fortunate we are. And so then if you could still have that approach with your team and say, hey, we didn't win last night, but guess what? Patty scored her 1,000th point. Mm-hmm. We broke our record for fans in attendance for a home game this year. Finding joy is right around us if we will choose to look for it, instead of looking at maybe during challenging times, everything that's going wrong.
Yeah, it's a choice in so many ways. You talk about your faith a lot. You talk about coaching. When did you realize that your faith was important for you to kind of help, I guess, lead you and guide you as a coach? When did you realize those two things could kind of intermingle?
Yeah, well, without even knowing it, it was always there. My college coach, Rick Moody, he was the deacon at his church. Yeah. And we play on Sundays, right, in our league. And I'll forget, he was late to every shoot around we had at home for my 4-year career. And he was unapologetic about it, because he said, I'm going to teach my Sunday school class. And after my Sunday school class, I'll come to shoot around. So he walked in to shoot around about 15 minutes late every Sunday in his suit with his Bible in his hand. Never said a word, but that testimony, good Lord, it's stuck, right? So it's always been there. I think when I became a head coach, I realized how important it was for me to really cut out the fat, right? Just really dwindle down some things that I was doing in terms of the music I was listening to, what I was watching. And because whether it is players or coaches, mentors, whoever it is, mentees, when they call you and they ask you for advice, or they ask you to pray for them, or they walk in and something devastating has happened, I've got to be prepared not only to help them, but to help myself. And in order to do that, I've got to lean heavily on my faith. And so I am definitely a person that what comes in, what comes out, and up and out. And so I became really intentional about just really streamlining the things that I listened to, the things that I read, and the things that I watched. So I've always had it, but I just really trimmed the fat in a lot of other areas to make sure that everything that I was consuming on a day-to-day basis as I drive into the office, when I wake up in the morning, were things that were going to fill me, number one, to fill my cup. My cup runneth over. The excess is for everybody else. My cup needs to be full for me, right? The runneth over part is what you guys get. So filling my cup, and then just making sure that I had, sage advice, wisdom, and it came from a faithful and a spiritual place when I am speaking to people who walk in this office or call me on the phone.
When you became a head coach, was that a struggle to keep your cup filled? Because coaches are constantly pouring out to others, your assistant coaches, your players, your staff. And then you can find yourself, and I've talked to many coaches, men and women on this show, who've found themselves in seasons of life with an empty cup. And they're like, wait a minute, I completely forgot that I'm supposed to fill my own cup too before I can help pour out to others. How's that been for you?
I've got a rhythm now. I've got a system, and it works. I started waking up at 4 a.m.
4 a.m.
Oh, wait, I'm a 4 a.m.er. Yeah. And that's my time. That's when I fill my cup. I have some spiritual direction during that time, and I work out. And those are the two things, that gives me clarity. It gets me ready for the day. It gets my juices going, that dopamine hit that I feel when I'm working out. And, it just kind of gets me where I need to be. So from 4 to 6:30, that's my time.
Hmm.
Nobody's going to bother me during that time. Everybody is asleep. My phone's not going to ring. And so that's what I figured out that worked for me. And I will not compromise that for anybody. Because again, it's what gets me going. And also I prefer it to be in the morning. So I do have a full cup when I walk into the office. It doesn't really, for me, help me to do it at lunch or at the end of the day, because the day is over. And so it's how I start my day. And that has been a really good recipe for me.
That's really good. 4 a.m. Like, what time do you go to bed at night? I mean, if you have a game, you're going till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night easily, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So on game day, I sleep in. On game day, I sleep in till about 7 or 8, which is sleeping in for me. And then I stay at the house until it's time to go into the office, because I really don't sleep from Thursday to Friday. So it changes a little bit during season. My hard rule is to be in the bed by 10. That gives me 6 hours of sleep from 10 to 4. Sometimes it's 9, sometimes it's 9:30. I have 2 small girls, 6 and 4. So they go down at 8:30.
Yeah.
And most of the time I try to be in the bed an hour after I put them down at 8:30. So by 9:30, most of the time I'm asleep. And then of course, during the season, it changes.
Wow, Joni, you got me beat. I thought 5:30 was early. I'm up an hour and a half before my wife. And when my daughter was in the house, I was way up before her. And now I'm like 4 a.m. That feels,
Yeah.
I don't know, but you gotta be disciplined, right? When you're looking at having time with God and making sure you have time to fill your own cup, it's a discipline that you can then, I'm just thinking you can then share that with your team and be like, hey, I'm not anything special, but you have to make time in order to make the things in your life a priority.
Yeah, there's a sacrifice that comes with it. And I feel so much better when I don't do it. I feel off.
Yeah.
There was in 2017, I tore my Achilles 2 months after having my first child. I tore my Achilles in practice, jacking around and thinking I could still do things that I can't. And I still was waking up early, but I couldn't work out. Like for 6 weeks after having surgery, I could not put pressure on my foot, and I was off. I don't think the outside observer could notice it, but I just felt off. And part of that was because I couldn't work out the way I wanted to. I'm a runner, right? So, I love to pound the pavement and just think and pray and listen to gospel. And I could tell I was off because I didn't have that. So I think whatever works for you is what you have to figure out. There is a sacrifice that comes with it. And the other thing that I found too, like I realized when I became a head coach that my prayer time and my devotional time, like I was forgetting to do it, or I was running out of time to do it. And so that's also how it came to play in the morning. But the other thing I learned is, my prayer time should be all the time with God. It
Right.
shouldn't just be a set time that I give him 30 minutes a day. Like it should be in everything that I do. Like, Lord, it's raining outside. I need to run to the grocery store. I don't have an umbrella. Like, please just make it stop raining for 2 minutes. It happens. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like that's the kind of banner I want to have with God. And so it's all the time for me, which is, again, it goes back to what I listen to now and just the podcast I'm listening to or the music I'm listening to. Every moment I have, for me, it's ways to fill my cup.
Yeah, when I've given talks or spoken to teams or even at conferences, I always tell people for the longest time, I had God as a piece of my life.
Right.
It's the centerpiece. He has to be the centerpiece of all that we are. And a piece of your life is great. Like there's a starting point, but man, when he becomes the centerpiece, he's with you everywhere you go.
Yeah. It's so much more fun, right?
Yes, exactly. And you see people differently. I think you see life differently. You appreciate more. Like you said, you have more joy. So it's really good. We're talking to Joni Taylor here on Sports Spectrum from Texas A&M. When did Christ become Lord for you? Like, was there a moment that you can point back to where you said, yep, I'm all in, God, let's go?
Early. I grew up in the church, grew up Methodist, went through confirmation classes. And so my first time, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but like somewhere between 11 and 13 is the first time that I got baptized. And then I got baptized again, or just rededicated my life as in high school before I went to college. And it's just been a central part ever since then. Obviously not as strong as it is now. It's continued to grow as I've gotten older, but I'm fortunate that, I've always had that strong background of faith in my life.
No, that's good. When did you realize you wanted to be a coach? Was that when you were playing that you saw coaching as a possibility?
No, not at all.
No?
No, my degree was in secondary education, and I was going to go to grad school, get my counseling degree, and I was going to be a high school counselor and a Christian counselor on the weekend. That was it. And My fifth year, I played at Alabama. So my fifth year at Alabama, I was doing student teaching because it's hard to student teach and play at the same time. You're missing school constantly, and you could only miss a certain number of days. And so that fifth year, I worked in the men's basketball office. Mark Goffrey was the coach, but Darren Boatwright, he was the director of operations, and I was his student assistant. He's now an athletic director, and I worked for him, and that's when I caught the bug. Like, I mean, I had no idea what my coaches did. I thought they came to practice for a couple of hours, watched some film, and wore cool Nike gear, right? Um,
Yeah, that's
so to
right.
be on the inside and just see the amount of time and the meetings and everything that goes into not only just preparation for games, but just like the investment in, lives and how to change lives and hold them accountable. And I tell you, the other thing that really impacted me greatly, that was the year of 9/11.
Mm.
And I'll never forget sitting in the men's office, and we're all obviously glued to the TV, crying. We've got teammates and friends whose parents live in New York, and they can't contact them. I mean, you remember that
Oh,
was
yeah.
just
Yeah.
right. And I'll never forget Coach Goffrey called the office. He was driving back from the Birmingham airport because they had obviously shut down all planes. Well, September is a contact period in basketball. It's when you can go to a prospect's home and go to their school and watch them practice and go sit in their home. You get to come to their environment and meet their family and talk to them and just give a presentation on why this school should be where you go. And I'll never forget, he called and he asked, were we all okay? And he said that he was okay and that he was, driving back. And he said they've shut down all, travel for who we don't know how long, but I still have this calendar in front of me. And I've got to get from here to here to here to here and here to here. And he said, when I get back to the office, you guys have it put together for me how I'm going to do that.
Mm.
And the Birmingham airport to Tuscaloosa is like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So when he walks in 45 minutes, we have got to figure out by car, bus, train, how he's still going to get in front of all these student athletes. And so I think we all just kind of took a big breath and, wiped our eyes. But what it taught me was just doing that, how sports can still bring you together. I remember, when the Yankees played their first game after that happened. I mean, I don't think there was a dry eye in the house or on TV watching the Yankees play that first baseball game after 9/11 and the first football game after 9/11. It just really showed me how special sports is and how it's a common thread and that everybody can relate to. And so I just knew in that moment it was something I wanted to be a part of.
Wow. So how did you pursue that? Like how did the doors start to, what's the first door maybe that you saw open outside of what you just described that gave you this shot to be on a sideline and be like, yeah, I'm confident here. I can do this.
Really fortunate and blessed. My position coach at Alabama, Mike Murphy, about 3 weeks after the end of the season, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, I need a favor." And I said, "Sure. Who's coming to town? I'll host." Because as a player, I hosted a lot of the official visits. And, even as a fifth year when I wasn't playing, if they had somebody on campus, I'd go to the games and sit next to them during the game and talk to the parents. And so I was still involved in helping them a ton with the recruiting process. And so I just figured somebody else was coming on campus. And I said, "Yeah, I'll help you out. What do you need? Who you got coming in?" And he said, "Well, kind of like that, but on a more permanent basis." He said, "I just became the head coach at Troy University, and I would love for you to be my recruiting coordinator."
Hmm.
And I could have thrown the phone. I started stuttering. I just was like, "I don't know how to break down film. I don't know how to." And he goes, "Listen, you'll be fine. I can teach you all of that. My philosophy. You got a great personality. You're really good with people. Like, you'll be fine." And so I had a decision to make. I could follow my path, which is to stay at Alabama in my comfort zone, go to grad school, get my grad degree, or I could go jump into the fire. And thought about it, talked to my family about it, prayed about it, and jumped into the fire, and the rest is history. So
Wow.
I was fortunate to go work for someone who I played for. So it gave me an immediate comfort being on the floor. I knew what he wanted. I knew his expectations. And so I was also able to be at an institution that was Division I, but it wasn't Power Five. So my mistakes weren't going to be on ESPN. I could kind of learn the ropes without it being detrimental. And so 21 years later, here I am.
Yeah, isn't it funny to look back? I mean, I know you had stops at Louisiana Tech and Alabama, LSU, of course, Georgia. And when you look back, you kind of see how God was ordering your steps. The Proverbs talks about, a man's heart plans his ways, or a woman's heart plans her ways, but the Lord is who directs our steps. And I really don't think we really know those steps quite often until we look back. And now
Absolutely.
you can look back 21 years and say, look what God did.
Yep. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And one of the things that really helped me was our other assistant coach, Sean Page. He was originally from Australia and his family still lived there. And
Mm.
so in the summer, he had worked it out where he got to go home during the summer. So it was just two of us. It was me and the head coach. And so I did a lot of work and it just really helped me. It propelled me. And I'm just grateful for it. Grateful for it all.
We saw a really cool resurgence at the Final Four and in the tournament this year for the women's game. And you've been around this game a long time, played in it. How do you think it's evolved and where do you think it's going as far as how it's, I mean, even just thinking about when you were playing 20 years ago to where it is today, it feels like we're on a really good path here.
We really are. I mean, you look at, scoring over 100 points in the final, over 9 million viewers. Like there's so many great things to talk about in the Final Four we just had in Dallas. And it's player led. It's player driven. I mean, we've got some prolific players and scorers with personalities in our game today. And I think in the past, like you can think back and there was a Candace Parker and there was a Sylvia Fowles and, there was a Brianna Stewart. And now there's a Angel Reese and a Caitlin Clark and a Leah Boston and Maddie Stiegers, who scored over 1,000 points in one season. You can go on and on about just the great players that are in our game. And so I think between that and then the coverage, the SEC has a network, the ACC has a network. Like games are just more easily found than they were when we played. I can remember being on TV. It was a big deal. Like, oh my God, this is a TV game.
Yeah.
And now every game's on TV. And what a great way for our game to get put in the homes of people so they can see what a great product we have.
And it helps with recruiting, I would imagine too, right? When you're talking to young people today versus 7, 8, 9 years ago, it has to be, when you're talking to those young women, it has to be a different kind of conversation, I would imagine, than it was 5, 6, like I said, a decade ago.
Well, it's really important that, especially for females, that their family sees them play. And before that, without TV, that kind of made you in some ways have regional decisions about that because my family needs to drive to see me play. Yeah. Now, there's not a game being played that you can either stream, watch on your laptop, or watch on ESPN or the SEC network. And so it just makes it a lot more comfortable for players to go further from home, which again just gives more parity. Because now there's more options. There's always those options, but players feel more comfortable going further away from home. And it's an exciting thing for them to talk about, especially as it relates to NIL, because they're on TV now. So they have an opportunity to build their brand.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I'm glad that we have it. And I'm thinking it's going to be fine tuned just like everything else will be, but it's still an important thing for these young athletes to have. What do you think the biggest difference is? And this is one of the questions I had written down. So much we haven't even gotten to because I just love our conversation. It's just back and forth. But one of the things I like to ask people is how they've grown or seen themselves grow since they started at a pivotal point, right? When you became a head coach, that's a pivotal point for Joni Taylor to be a head coach when you were with Georgia in 2015 and where you are today with Texas A&M. What's the biggest difference between the Joni of then and the Joni that I'm talking to right now?
Wow. I think the biggest difference is I've always been a pretty sure person. I've always, kind of known what I wanted to do and went after it. But I think like when you have a clear sense of who you are and what your purpose is, it makes it really easy to say yes and say no. And I think that's the biggest difference from when I started out and now. I felt like as a first year head coach, second year head coach, I had to say yes to a lot of things that really stretched me. And now this is my purpose. And if saying yes to this is not in line with my purpose, then the answer is no. And so I think I'm more sure about what my yeses are and what my nos are. And that allows me to stay focused in my priorities, and not get stretched into things that I don't want to say don't matter, but that don't line up with my purpose. I think the other thing that has changed for me is that I recognize that I have a responsibility and an obligation to just be not put myself out there, but not be afraid to share the gospel. There's so much around not talking about God at work and not praying, and if that's what I'm going to get fired for, then I'm just going to get fired for it. And so there's also, with age and with the experience, there's less of a fear of me speaking out about things that I feel strongly about, because I feel like I've earned the right to do that. And I have a platform and I should be doing that. And so, I can remember in the beginning, like there was something I would want to say, but I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen if I say that, but I think that's a responsibility that I have. And I'm a lot more aware of that, and understand that it's something that I need to do.
Well, another thing that has changed since you became a head coach, I think, if I'm doing my math right, is you weren't a mom when you first became a head coach, right? And now
Right.
you are. So how's that been balancing? The balance word is always used, and I can't imagine, all the different coaches that have talked to you and said, Joni, how are you doing this? Being a mom, being a wife, and being a head coach and being responsible for this program. How are you doing it?
The one thing I'll say is balance does not exist.
Right. That's right.
The work-life balance, everybody wants you to talk about work-life balance and come speak about work-life balance. And I used to do that. And then I realized this is not real. Like, there is no balance. So once I hear myself talk about my day, there is no balance. I take my girls to school, and at 7:15, I drop them off, and I don't see them again until 7:30 at night. That's not balance. Our season ended and I picked up my daughter from school. I've never picked her up from school ever. And I picked her up from school, and she looked at me like,
who are you?
why are you here? And I was
Yeah.
like, dang.
Thanks a
Um,
lot.
I think the biggest thing that I've tried to do is, there's a book called Be Where Your Feet Are.
Mm.
And that's what I say. It's not work-life balance, it's be where your feet are. My feet are at work a whole lot more than they're at home or with my family. But when I am wherever I am fully present. I'm at work right now. So unless my kids are homesick or there's another reason, like, I am at work. That is what my mind is on. When I'm at home, I am at home. I just told you I walk in at about 7 o'clock every night. They go to bed at 8:30. So for that hour and a half, I am not on my phone.
Yeah.
If there's a Zoom or a phone call that I have to take, it is after 8:30 when they've gone to bed. Like, I cannot do that to them. And that has worked out well. I think my kids are thriving. I think they're healthy. I think they understand what mom does. But it's be where your feet are. I made a decision. My husband and I both were pretty busy, and we both said, like, we can't go down the rabbit hole of everything we're going to miss. Right. But when we're present, let's be present and make sure they understand. And then we try to integrate them in our jobs as much as possible. I'm fortunate that I work at an institution that allows them to travel with me, and my parents and his parents as caregivers. And so they're around a ton, and they get to see what it is that we're doing up close and personal, and it gives them a better understanding. They think they have 15 sisters.
That's great.
So, and I just have a ton of help too. Both of our parents live with us to help us out, and that makes things a lot easier when you know that when you're absent, your mom or your mother-in-law or your dad or your father-in-law are the ones that are standing in the gap, for me. And so that's something that I'm thankful for. And I give God the glory that I'm able to have that type of village, helping out.
It had to be a big conversation, I would imagine, in even taking this job, right? Because when you move with young kids from Georgia to Texas, that's a big decision.
We talked about it for a long time. My husband and I, we prayed about it. Fortunately, it was something that we had some time to ponder over. And just, the conversation really was, are we going to live in Athens the rest of our life or College Station the rest of our life? It was important that we thought both places were family environments and would be great places that our kids grew up. And just, at the end of the day, this was the decision we made. It was definitely the right decision for us. We're super happy here. But yeah, it's not easy when you have to pick up and change, find doctors and change schools. We also thought at 5 and 3 that it was the time that we could make that move and they'd be okay with it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
She is Joni Taylor. Last question. Appreciate your time here and saying yes to coming on this show. What are you most thankful to God for in the season that you're in right now? There's probably a ton, so much that we've talked about, but when you think about gratitude, what comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is his grace, because I know that I fall short daily. And so when I think about the grace that he has for me with all the mistakes that I make, that's what I'm most thankful for. I'm most thankful for just the grace. And the other thing is that I'm thankful for his resilience because he sticks close to us when we do some really stupid things at times. And so, it's really true. Like he craves a relationship with us. And so to just know that he's always right there, I'm thankful that we are close and that, I feel him, I hear him in different ways. And it's a calming presence that is always there for me. And I know that's God. So that is probably what I'm most thankful for.
Yeah, well, that's what we should all be thankful for if we're believers, is his grace. Because somebody said it to me, we're all on the hot mess express in this life. And I laughed so hard when she said that, just like you laughed. And I said, yeah, but that's it. Like, we're all just broken people who are in need of a savior. And man, thank you for his grace, right? Mm-hmm. So, Joni, you've been awesome. Thanks for being on the show. Hopefully we'll do it again soon, and all the best to you.
I would love to. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for watching today on Sports Spectrum. Make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss any other videos. And if you want more stories on sports and faith, check out our website, sportsspectrum.com.